I was trading my future for groceries, dizzy from hunger as the clerk offered a humiliating $12 for my textbooks. He sneered that nobody bought books that did not make you rich. Then came the tap of a cane. My supposedly senile, penniless grandfather stepped forward, slapped a platinum credit card on the counter, and announced that if I had to sell books to eat dinner, our wealthy family was due for a serious audit. My name is Nora Rivera. I am 27 years old, and until 20 minutes ago, I was pretty sure my life had bottomed out in the biography section of a dusty secondhand bookstore. People talk about the starving student phase like it is some romantic rite of passage. They picture instant noodles eaten with friends in a messy dorm room while debating philosophy. They do not picture the reality, which is standing on the sidewalk outside your apartment because the landlord changed the lock's code, and you are terrified to text him because you are 6 days late on rent. They do not picture opening your banking app and staring at the number $38.14 while knowing that your student loan autopay is trying to hit the account in exactly 4 hours. My apartment was a shoebox in the bad part of town, the kind of place where the sirens were better lullabies than the silence. My refrigerator currently contained a bottle of ketchup that had expired 2 months ago, a tray of ice cubes, and absolutely nothing else. My stomach was not just growling, it was actively digesting itself. It felt like a hollow cave where a small, angry animal was scratching at the walls. I worked as a part-time project assistant for Northline Community Works, a nonprofit trying to bring affordable housing to the neglected districts. It was noble work. It was the kind of work that makes you feel good in your soul and empty in your pockets. The grant money was late again. It was always late. But my hunger was right on time. So, I made the decision. It was a choice that felt like physical amputation. I packed my canvas tote bag with the only assets I had left: advanced urban economics, zoning law and social equity, the history of metropolitan infrastructure. These were not just books. These were 3 years of my life. These were the sleepless nights, the caffeine jitters, the margin notes written in moments of breakthrough. They were my ticket out of poverty, and I was walking them down the street to sell them so I could buy peanut butter and bread. The bell above the door of the book nook jingled with a cheerful sound that made me want to scream. The store smelled of old paper and vanilla, a scent that usually comforted me, but today it just smelled like failure. I heaved the tote bag onto the counter. The thud it made was heavy, solid, significant. The clerk did not look up from his phone for a full 10 seconds. When he finally acknowledged my existence, I felt a flash of irritation. He was younger than me, maybe 22, with the kind of haircut that cost more than my monthly food budget. On his wrist sat a dive watch that was thick, shiny, and definitely not bought with a bookstore wage. "Selling?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded thin. "They are graduate-level texts. Most of them are the latest editions. Hardly any highlighting." He pulled the first book out, Sustainable Urban Planning, and looked at the cover with a sneer curling his lip. He did not even open it to check the condition. He just tapped the ISBN into his computer with agonizing slowness. "Urban planning, huh?" he said, chuckling to himself. "Let me guess. You want to save the world by building bike lanes?" I gripped the edge of the counter. "I want to design cities that function for the working class," I said, trying to keep my dignity intact. He snorted. "Right, working class. That is where the money is, obviously." He tossed the book onto a pile as if it were a gossip magazine. "You know, if you had studied finance or real estate law, you would be buying the building right now instead of pawning off your homework." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted iron. "Just give me a price, please." He scanned the other 3 books, his eyes glazing over. The silence stretched. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator unit where they sold overpriced sodas. My stomach gave a loud, traitorous gurgle. The clerk heard it. He smirked. "Look," he said, leaning back. "Nobody buys this stuff. It is niche. It sits on the shelf gathering dust. I am doing you a favor by even taking them." He turned the monitor screen toward me. The number glowing in neon green was an insult. It was a slap in the face. $12.50 for $400 worth of textbooks, For my future. That is a mistake, I said, my voice trembling. The zoning law book alone is worth 80 used. Supply and demand, sweetheart, he said, checking his nails. I have no demand, so I am supplying you with $12. Take it or leave it. I stared at the money in the register drawer. $12. It could buy a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, maybe a carton of eggs if they were on sale. It meant I would not pass out during my lecture tomorrow. It meant survival. But it also meant accepting that my education, my passion, was worth less than a fast food lunch to the rest of the world. I was about to say yes. I was about to nod and let him hand me the cash. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hoping against hope it was a deposit notification from Northline. It was not. It was a text message from Aunt Vivian. Vivian Hart Nora. Darling. We expect you at Maple Harbor for Thanksgiving. Thursday. 2 p.m. sharp. The catering staff is short-handed. So be a dear and help keep an eye on the twins during cocktails. Also, do not bother booking a room. You can crash on the pullout. Save your pennies. XOXO. I stared at the screen. Save your pennies. Aunt Vivian lived in a gated community where the driveways were heated so the snow would not inconvenience the Mercedes SUVs. Her husband, Uncle Robert, worked in mergers and acquisitions. My cousin Brianna was an influencer who posted videos of herself unboxing handbags that cost more than my entire student loan debt. And they wanted me to come, not as family, but as unpaid help. They wanted me to drive 2 hours, smile while they ate turkey that cost $20 a pound, and watch their spoiled children while sleeping on a lumpy couch. The anger flared hot in my chest, mixing with the hunger. I looked at my books. I looked at the smirk on the clerk's face. I felt small. I felt trapped. I felt like the world had decided my place was at the bottom, and everyone was just waiting for me to accept it. Well, the clerk asked, drumming his fingers. I do not have all day. $12.50. Do you want the cash or not? I opened my mouth. I was going to say yes. I was going to sell my pride for $12.50. The bell above the door jingled again. A draft of cold November air swept in, carrying the scent of dried leaves and rain. If my granddaughter has to sell her library to afford dinner, a voice said from the doorway, then it seems this family requires a serious audit. The voice was old, scratching like dry parchment, but it carried a weight that made the air in the shop change pressure. I froze. I knew that voice, but the tone was wrong. It was not the confused, rambling tone I was used to hearing over the phone from the nursing home. It was sharp. It was cold. It was commanding. I turned around slowly. Standing there was Harold Mercer, my grandfather. He looked exactly like the family described him, a relic. He was wearing a tweed coat that had seen better decades, patches on the elbows, the hem fraying slightly. He leaned heavily on a wooden cane. His white hair was wispy, and his face was a map of deep wrinkles. For the last 5 years, Aunt Vivian and the rest of the family had spoken about him with a mix of pity and annoyance. Poor Harold. He is losing it. He made bad investments. He is broke. He is senile. But as he walked toward the counter, the cane tapping a steady, rhythmic warning on the hardwood floor, he did not look senile. He looked like a shark disguised as a goldfish. The clerk looked at Harold, then at his shabby coat, and let out a sigh. We do not have a public restroom, old man, and we do not give change. Harold ignored him completely. He walked right up to me. He smelled of peppermint and old tobacco. He looked down at the books on the counter, then at the pitiful offer on the screen, and finally at me. His eyes, usually watery and vague during our FaceTime calls, were suddenly piercing blue steel. Nora, he said, put your books back in your bag. Grandpa, I whispered, what are you doing here? How did you get here? The home is 40 minutes away. I took a cab, he said simply. He turned to the clerk. Cancel that transaction. The clerk rolled his eyes. Look, buddy, she agreed to the price. We are done here. She did not agree, Harold said. His voice did not rise, but it got harder. And you are not buying them. I run a business, the clerk spat. If you are not buying anything, get out. Harold reached into the inner pocket of his tattered coat. I expected him to pull out a crumpled tissue, or maybe a handful of loose change. Aunt Vivian always said he had to count pennies to afford his medication. Instead, Harold Mercer pulled out a sleek black leather wallet. He flipped it open and extracted a card. It was not a debit card. It was not a standard credit card. It was heavy metal, matte black, with silver lettering that caught the fluorescent light. He slapped it on the counter. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet store. I am buying the books, Harold said, at full retail price, plus a 20% inconvenience fee for the young lady. The clerk stared at the card. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by confusion and a sudden, instinctive fear of money that was older and bigger than his watch. Sir, I cannot process a transaction like this for a buyback. Then ring them up as a sale, Harold said. Ring them up as if I am buying them from your store. Charge me whatever you want. Just put the money on that card and give the cash to her. The clerk hesitated, his hand hovering over the machine. I have to check the limit. Harold smiled. It was not a nice smile. Go ahead. Try to find the limit. The clerk swiped the card. His hands were shaking slightly. The machine beeped instantly. Approved. He opened the register and started counting out bills. His attitude had shifted from condescension to terrified servitude. He handed a stack of 20s to Harold. Harold did not touch the money. He pointed his cane at me. Give it to her. The clerk shoved the cash toward me. $200, $300, $400. I stood there, stunned, clutching my tote bag with one hand and taking the money with the other. It felt surreal. My grandfather, the man who was supposed to be destitute, the man Aunt Vivian complained about supporting, had just dropped hundreds of dollars without blinking. Keep the receipt, Harold told the clerk. Then he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that only the three of us could hear. And young man, a city is only smart when it keeps the people who know how to build housing for everyone, not just for the little boys who wear watches that cost more than their cars. He turned to me, his expression softening just a fraction. Come on, Nora, let us walk. We walked out of the bookstore and onto the chilly sidewalk. The sun was setting, casting long shadows down the street. I felt dizzy, but not from hunger anymore. The adrenaline was pumping through my veins. Grandpa, I stammered, shoving the cash into my pocket. What? How everyone says you are broke. Vivian says she pays for the nursing home. She says you sold the shipyard for nothing and lost the rest. Harold stopped and leaned on his cane, watching the traffic go by. He looked at me, really looked at me, with a clarity that was terrifying. Vivian says a lot of things, he said. Vivian sees what she wants to see. She sees an old man in a cheap coat, and she assumes the wallet inside is empty. But the card, I said. I have my resources. Nora, he said. But that is not important right now. What is important is why you are standing in a pawn shop selling your education. I looked down at my shoes. The shame washed over me again. The grant money is late. Northline is having cash flow issues. They said the city funding is stuck in committee. Harold hummed. It was a low, thoughtful sound. Northline received their city disbursement 3 days ago. The transfer was cleared Tuesday morning at 9. My head snapped up. What? How could you possibly know that? And your research stipend, he continued, ignoring my question. It was allocated in the budget last month. If it has not reached your account, it is not because the money does not exist. It is because someone is holding it. I stared at him. My brain was trying to reconfigure everything I knew about my grandfather. This was not the man who fell asleep in his chair after 10 minutes of conversation. This was a man who knew banking schedules. This was a man who knew my employer's finances better than I did. Are you spying on me? I asked. I am watching, he corrected. There is a difference. I watch everything. Nora, I watch the markets. I watch the family. And I watch you. He tapped his cane on the concrete. You are the only one doing anything real. You know, the rest of them. They are just moving money around, skimming off the top, playing pretend in their big glass houses. He reached out and patted my arm. His hand was warm and strong. You are going to Maple Harbor for Thanksgiving, he stated. It was not a question. I was going to say no, I admitted. Vivian just texted. She wants me to babysit. She treats me like the help. I know, Harold said. She treats me like a liability. We are quite the pair. Are we not? The help and the burden? He smiled then, a mischievous glint in his eye that made him look 50 years younger. Go, Nora, he said. Go to Maple Harbor, but this time, do not just sit there and take their insults. Do not just eat their turkey and sleep on their couch. Why would I go? I asked. I have money for food now. I can stay here. I can study. You are studying urban planning, Harold said. You study how systems fail. You study how to tear down rotten structures and build new ones. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Think of this weekend as a field trip, he said. I want you to go there, and I want you to open your eyes. I want you to listen to what they say when they think no one important is listening. I want you to write it down. Write what down? Everything, Harold said. Where the money comes from, where it goes, who they meet, what they sign. He straightened his coat and adjusted his grip on the cane. Consider it a practical exam, he said. On the rezoning of the Mercer family. I looked at him, standing there on the grimy sidewalk, the wind ruffling his white hair. He looked dangerous. He looked thrilling. For the first time in months, I did not feel like a victim of my circumstances. I felt like I had just been handed a weapon. Okay, I said. I will go. Good, Harold said. Now, go buy a steak. A big one. You look like you are about to faint, and we cannot have our lead architect passing out before the demolition begins. My 10-year-old sedan rattled like a bag of loose bolts as I pulled up to the wrought iron gates of Maple Harbor Estates. The guard in the booth stared at my rusted bumper with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for fugitives, taking a full minute to verify my name on the guest list before buzzing me in. As the gate swung open, the noise of the real world faded away, replaced by the eerie, manicured silence of extreme wealth. The driveways here were not just paved, they were cobbled with imported stone. The lawns were not just grass, they were green velvet carpets that looked like they had been trimmed with cuticle scissors. Every house was a fortress of glass and white stone, massive modern boxes that screamed money but whispered nothing about home. I parked my car at the very end of Aunt Vivian's driveway, tucking it behind a massive hedge so it would not offend the neighbors' aesthetic sensibilities. Ahead of me, the driveway was a showroom of German engineering 2 black SUVs and a convertible that probably cost more than my entire college tuition. I walked up the slate path, taking a deep breath to steel myself. I told myself I was an anthropologist entering a hostile tribe. I was a spy behind enemy lines. I was not just poor little Nora looking for a free meal. The door swung open before I could even knock. Aunt Vivian stood there, framed by the golden light of the foyer. She looked like a magazine cover, wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater that likely cost $600 and holding a glass of white wine that caught the light just so. "Nora, darling," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that involved zero body contact and a lot of air kissing near my ear. She smelled of expensive gardenias and Chardonnay. "Hi, Aunt Vivian," I said, trying to match her pitch. "The house looks Oh, thank God you are here." She cut me off, releasing me and immediately pivoting back inside. The catering service sent one fewer server than I paid for, and the kitchen is a disaster zone. I need you to jump on the salad prep immediately. Oh, and the twins are running feral somewhere upstairs. If you hear breaking glass, run. She was already walking away, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. I stood there with my duffel bag still on my shoulder. "Where should I put my things?" I called out. She waved a manicured hand vaguely toward the back of the house without looking back. Just stash it somewhere. Sweetie, out of sight. I walked through the hallway, my sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The house was aggressive in its luxury. There were vases of fresh orchids on every surface. On the side table, I saw a stack of unopened shopping bags from high-end designers. Peeking out next to a pile of mail, the top letter was a bill for the country club membership, and right next to it was a thick envelope from a luxury travel agency. "It is just so hard right now," I heard Vivian saying as I passed the living room archway. She was talking to a woman I did not recognize, probably an early guest. "With the economy the way it is, and having to shoulder the entire burden of Daddy's care at the nursing home, honestly, we are scraping by. It is a sacrifice. But what can you do? Family is family." I tightened my grip on my bag. Scraping by. I thought about the $12 the bookstore clerk had offered me. I thought about Harold's penniless state. Vivian was drinking wine that cost $50 a bottle while complaining about paying for a father who, I now knew, was likely paying for himself. I found the kitchen, which was the size of my entire apartment. It was white, sterile, and buzzing with activity. Standing at the massive marble island was my cousin, Brianna. She had a ring light set up on a tripod and was speaking into her phone with a bright, animated expression that vanished the second she stopped talking. And that is how we prep the organic cranberry glaze so satisfying. You guys, happy Thanksgiving. She held a pose for 3 seconds, smiling at the lens, then tapped the screen and her face dropped into a look of pure boredom. "Hey, Brianna," I said. She looked up, her eyes scanning me from my messy bun down to my worn-out jeans. "Oh, hey, Nora. You made it." She turned back to her phone, scrolling through comments. "Do not stand behind me. Okay, the lighting is set for this angle and you are casting a shadow." "Good to see you too," I muttered. A man in a vest and dress shirt breezed into the kitchen, grabbing a handful of almonds from a crystal bowl. It was Logan, Brianna's husband. He worked in high-frequency trading, which as far as I could tell meant he moved imaginary money around to make real money disappear from other people's pockets. "Nora," he boomed, chewing loudly. "Still saving the world, one depressed neighborhood at a time. I am working on affordable housing grants, Logan," I said, setting my bag down in a corner. "We are trying to get funding for the Northline district." "Cute," he said, winking at Brianna. "Cute hobby. You know, I just cleared my year-end bonus. 6 figures. Again, maybe I should write a check to your little charity." "Tax write-off, right." "It is not a charity," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "It is urban development." "Same thing," he dismissed, checking his heavy gold watch. "Hey, Viv said you are on kid duty tonight. Awesome. We are planning to open the Good Scotch later, and I do not want little Braden and Kayla destroying the vibe." Speaking of tonight, Vivian appeared in the doorway, looking stressed. "Nora, slight change of plans on the sleeping arrangements. The Doyles decided to stay over, so they are taking the guest suite, and Brianna needs the office for her editing station." "Okay," I said slowly. "So, where am I sleeping?" Vivian smiled, a tight, pained expression that suggested my existence was a logistical error she was heroically correcting. "We set up the air mattress in the laundry room. It is actually perfect because it is right next to the playroom, so you can hear the twins if they wake up. You know how light a sleeper you are." The laundry room. I felt a stinging sensation behind my eyes, but I forced myself to blink it away. Harold's voice echoed in my head. "Do not just eat their turkey. Open your eyes." "That sounds fine. Aunt Vivian," I said, my voice flat. "You are an angel," she said, already checking her phone. "Now, chop. The caterer needs the onions done for the stuffing." For the next 4 hours, I was invisible. I stood at the counter, chopping onions until my eyes watered. While the house filled with guests, I watched them from the periphery. Men in velvet blazers and women in silk dresses drifted in and out of the kitchen, refilling their glasses, laughing at jokes that were not funny. They talked about their second homes in Aspen, They talked about the wait list for the new Tesla model. They talked about which private school had the better polo team. Not a single person asked me about my PhD program. Not one person asked me about my life, unless it was to ask where to find a coaster. I was a ghost in the machine of their opulence. During a lull in the chopping, I heard Vivian holding court in the living room. I wiped my hands on a towel and moved closer to the doorway, staying in the shadows. "It is just tragic," Vivian was saying. Her voice lowered to a theatrical whisper. "Harold is, well, he is gone, mentally. Last week I visited, and he thought I was his sister. He just sits there staring at the wall." "That must be so hard to manage," a guest sympathized, "especially with the estate." "Oh, it is a nightmare," Vivian sighed. "He gets confused about his accounts. He tries to sign things he does not understand. I have to be so careful to protect him from himself. Honestly, at this point, he signs whatever paper you put in front of him if you tell him it is a menu." My blood ran cold. "He signs whatever paper you put in front of him." They were planting the seed. They were building a narrative of incompetence so that when they made their move, no one would question it. Harold was not the shark I had seen in the bookstore, in their story. He was a helpless victim of his own mind. I backed away before anyone could see me, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed air. "Nora," Brianna's voice cut through the noise. "The trash is full. Can you run it down to the basement bins? It smells gross in here." "Sure," I said. I grabbed the heavy bag of vegetable peels and packaging and headed for the basement door. The basement in the Maple Harbor house was finished, nicer than most people's living rooms, but the storage area was down a long hallway past the media room. I hauled the trash to the back exit, but as I was walking back, something caught my eye. There was a door slightly ajar. It was a storage closet I remembered playing hide-and-seek in as a child, usually filled with old holiday decorations. But now, a sliver of light was coming from inside. I paused. The hallway was empty. Upstairs, the party was roaring with laughter. I stepped closer and pushed the door open just an inch. The room was stacked with cardboard banker boxes. It smelled of dust and old paper, but these were not Christmas ornaments. I squinted at the writing on the side of the nearest box, written in thick black marker, H. Mercer, Foundation Files. Next to it, Mercer Estate, Liquidation Strategy, and another V. Hart, Custodial Accounts. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement draft. These were Harold's files. Why were they here if he was in a nursing home and his affairs were being managed by professionals? Why were boxes of his financial history sitting in Vivian's basement storage? I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, to touch the lid of the foundation box. "What do you think you are doing?" I spun around, gasping. Brianna was standing at the end of the hallway, her arms crossed, her silhouette sharp against the light from the media room. She was not filming now. Her face was hard, her eyes cold. I was just looking for more trash bags," I stammered. Stepping away from the door, Brianna walked toward me slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. She stopped inches from my face, up close. Her makeup looked like a mask. "Do not snoop, Nora," she said, her voice low and venomous. "It is unbecoming, and frankly, it is above your pay grade." "I saw Grandpa's name," I said, trying to stand my ground. "Why are his files here?" Brianna laughed. A short, sharp sound. "We are handling his transition. Not that you would understand the complexities of estate planning. You are busy trying to save the world with, what was it, $12 worth of used books?" I froze. How did she know? "Oh, do not look so shocked," she sneered. "Mom tracks your accounts. We know you are broke, Nora. We know you are desperate. That is why you are here, right? For the free food and the $20 Mom might slip you for gas." She reached past me and pulled the storage room door shut, locking it with a decisive click. "Leave the heavy lifting to the adults who actually have assets to manage," she said. "Go back to the kitchen. I think the trash needs to go out again." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the dim hallway, shaking with a mixture of humiliation and rage. She did not just think I was poor. She thought I was irrelevant. She thought I was a non-player character in the game of their lives. I did not go back to the kitchen immediately. I went to the laundry room. It was a narrow space, smelling aggressively of bleach and fabric softener. A deflated air mattress was shoved between the washing machine and the dryer. The dryer was running, tumbling a load of towels with a rhythmic, thumping clunk-clunk-clunk that vibrated through the floor. I sat down on the cold plastic of the mattress. I pulled my knees to my chest. I wanted to cry. I wanted to get in my car and drive until the gas ran out. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. They invited me here to serve them, to mock me, to show me exactly where I stood in the hierarchy. Adults who have assets to manage. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were still shaking. I opened the app I had installed on Harold's phone 3 years ago, Eldercare Connect. It was meant for monitoring vitals, a way for me to make sure he was okay when I could not visit. I watched the screen. Harold Mercer. Heart rate 72 BPM. Status resting. Location Silver Maple Assisted Living. The green dot pulsed steadily. He was there. He was alive. He was waiting. I thought about the boxes in the basement. Foundation files. Liquidation strategy. They were not just managing his money. They were erasing him. They were stripping him down for parts while he was still breathing. Convinced he was too weak to notice, and I was too poor to matter. The anger in my chest stopped feeling like a hot flush of shame and started feeling like something else. It felt cold. It felt hard. It felt like the steel of the credit card Harold had slapped on the bookstore counter. I was not just a poor student anymore. I was a spy. And I had just found the location of the enemy's armory. I looked at the rhythmic pulse on the phone screen. "Hold on. Grandpa?" I whispered to the empty room, the sound of the dryer masking my voice. "I am listening. I am watching." I lay back on the lumpy mattress, the smell of bleach filling my nose. I did not sleep. I lay there and listened to the heavy footsteps on the floorboards above my head, imagining the structure of the house, the weight bearing down on the beams. I was an urban planner. I knew how structures worked. I knew that even the biggest, most expensive houses had load-bearing walls, and if you knew where to hit them, the whole thing would come crashing down. Tomorrow. I would make the call. Tonight. I let the hate sharpen my focus. The air mattress was slowly losing air, folding in on itself like a dying lung. It was nearly midnight. The laundry room was cold, smelling aggressively of lavender detergent and the damp, subterranean chill of the basement. I sat cross-legged on the deflating plastic, my laptop balancing precariously on my knees. The screen was the only light in the room, casting a harsh blue glow on the dryer lint scattered across the floor. I was trying to save my job. The grant proposal for the North Line project had a hard deadline of 8 o'clock the next morning, and my report on zoning density was still 3 pages short. I typed a sentence, hit save, and watched the little spinning wheel of death. No connection. I checked the Wi-Fi settings. The network Hart Manor 5G was visible, but my saved password was being rejected. They had changed it. Of course they had changed it. I sighed, closed the laptop, and crept up the basement stairs. The house was quieter now, the dinner party guests having dispersed to their guest wings or driven home in their luxury cars. I found Brianna in the kitchen, leaning against the marble island, scrolling through her phone while eating a spoonful of almond butter straight from the jar. "Hey," I whispered, trying not to startle her. "Sorry to bother you. The Wi-Fi password seems to have changed. I need to send a file for work." Brianna did not look up. She licked the spoon with slow, deliberate pleasure. "Oh, yeah," she said eventually. "Mom changed it to keep the bandwidth clear for the streaming devices in the guest rooms. We cannot have buffering when the Doyles are trying to watch movies in 4K. I just need it for 10 minutes, I pleaded. "It is a text document. It takes 0 bandwidth." Brianna finally looked at me. Her eyes were glazed with exhaustion and disdain. "Nora, seriously, it is Thanksgiving week. Nobody works. It is tacky." I have to work. Brianna, I do not have a trust fund, she scoffed, dropping the spoon into the sink with a loud clatter. Look, Mom made a rule. No outside drama. No poor people problems dragging down the vibe. Tonight is family time. If you want internet, go to Starbucks. Oh wait, they are closed. She turned off the kitchen light, plunging us into semi-darkness. Go to sleep, Nora. You look like a raccoon. I stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade up the main staircase. The humiliation burned in my throat, hot and acidic. I turned around and went back down to the basement, back to my laundry room cell. I sat back down on the sinking mattress and enabled the hotspot on my phone. 1 bar of signal. It flickered between LTE and 3G. It would have to do. As I waited for the connection to stabilize, I leaned my head back against the wall. Closing my eyes, that was when I heard it. A static hiss. It was coming from the shelf above the washing machine, hidden behind a giant jug of fabric softener. I stood up and reached for it. It was an old baby monitor. The plastic yellowed with age. It must have been left over from when the twins were babies, forgotten in the clutter, but the green light was on. I frowned. Why was it on? I turned the volume dial on the side. The static cleared, replaced by the low, distinct hum of voices. My heart skipped a beat. The receiver was picking up a transmitter somewhere else in the house. The audio was tinny, but the acoustics were surprisingly clear, likely traveling through the metal ventilation ducts that connected the laundry room to the upper floors. I recognized the room immediately by the echo of the library. It was directly 2 floors above me, and I recognized the voices. Nervous about the timeline. Vivian! It was a man's voice, deep, smooth, professional. That had to be Graham Doyle, the financial advisor. Do not be nervous. Graham, be efficient. That was Aunt Vivian. Her voice was different than the sugary tone she used in the kitchen. It was lower, sharper, stripped of all pretense. He is 84 years old. He barely knows what day of the week it is. I pressed the monitor against my ear, my breath catching in my throat. The competency evaluation is a gray area, Graham said. If anyone challenges it later, if they subpoena the medical records, no one is going to challenge it, Vivian snapped. Who, Brianna? She just wants her check. Logan, he is part of the structure. And Nora. Please, the girl is selling books to buy ramen. She does not have the resources to hire a paralegal, let alone fight a contest of will. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor, clutching the plastic brick of the monitor. Fine, Graham said. The sound of papers shuffling came through the speaker. Let us review the mechanics. On Monday morning, 9 o'clock, we have the appointment at Ridgeview Notary Services. I have drafted the durable power of attorney. It is broad scope. It gives you total control over his personal assets, his medical decisions, and, crucially, the Harbor Light Foundation. Harbor Light. I had seen that name on the box in the basement. And once the POA is active, Vivian asked, there was a hunger in her voice that made my skin crawl. Once it is notarized, Graham continued, we initiate the transfer. We move the liquid assets from the Foundation's holding accounts into the new trust we established at Seabright Wealth. Since you are the primary trustee of the new vehicle, you control the allocation and the tax implications. This was a third voice, arrogant, slurring slightly. Logan. That is the beauty of it, Graham said, and I could practically hear his smirk. We frame it as a portfolio restructuring. We argue that the Foundation's current investments in low-yield municipal bonds, those housing projects he loves so much, are fiscally irresponsible. We dump them. We move the capital into high-growth tech derivatives. If the Foundation accidentally loses its nonprofit status due to a shift in operational scope, well, it just becomes a private family investment vehicle. The charity dies, but the money lives, and it lives in your pocket. A tax write-off for the funeral of a charity. Logan laughed. The sound of ice clinking in a glass followed. God, I love this country. So, Vivian said, Harold just has to sign. He just has to sign. Graham confirmed. Does he still have the motor skills? He can hold a pen, Vivian said dismissively. I will put the paper in front of him. I will tell him it is an updated insurance form for the nursing home, or a birthday card for the twins. It does not matter. He trusts me. And even if he hesitates, he is too weak to argue. I sat there, frozen. The cold from the floor seeped into my bones. This was not just a dysfunctional family. This was not just my aunt being mean. This was a felony. This was grand larceny. This was conspiracy to commit fraud against an elder. They were going to steal everything, not just his money, but his legacy. The Harborlight Foundation must be the source of the funding for the projects Harold cared about, the very things I was studying. They were going to gut it to buy more handbags and invest in tech stocks. My first instinct was violent. I wanted to run up the stairs, kick open the library door, and scream at them. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to shatter their crystal glasses and wipe the smug looks off their faces. I started to stand up. My fists clenched so hard my fingernails dug into my palms. Then, a memory washed over me. I was 10 years old. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Grandpa Harold. We were doing a Sudoku puzzle. I had been stuck on a number, frustrated, and I had just guessed, jamming a 5 into a box because I wanted to be done. Harold had placed his hand over mine. Nora, he had said gently, reaction is for amateurs. Strategy is for professionals. Do not react to the first punch. Do not guess, because you are angry. Look 3 steps ahead. Where does the 5 go if the 9 is here? Look 3 steps ahead. If I ran upstairs now, what would happen? They would deny it. They would say I was crazy. They would kick me out. They would destroy the evidence. I had no proof. I was the poor, desperate niece. They were the pillars of the community. Who would the police believe I sank back down onto the mattress? I took a deep breath, holding it for 4 seconds, releasing it for 4. I unlocked my phone. My hands were trembling, but my mind was starting to clear. It was the cold clarity of a blueprint. I opened my notes app. I created a new folder. I typed 2 words, laundry start. This was not a family visit anymore. This was a project, and I was the project manager. I needed to verify what I had heard. I needed physical evidence to match the audio. I remembered the door in the basement hallway, the one Brianna had caught me near. She had locked it, or at least, she thought she had locked it. I remembered the sound, a single click. But that door was old. The frame was warped. Sometimes, if you did not pull the handle tight, the bolt did not catch. I stood up. I slipped my phone into the front pocket of my oversized hoodie. I took off my shoes. I opened the laundry room door. The hallway was pitch black. The only light came from the small LEDs on the fuse box on the far wall. I moved silently, stepping on the edges of the floorboards where they were less likely to creak. I reached the storage room door. I held my breath. I gripped the brass knob. I turned it, applying the slightest amount of pressure. It gave. Brianna had been too busy being superior to check her work. The latch had missed the strike plate. I pushed the door open, slipping inside the narrow gap. The smell hit me instantly, musk, cedar, and the sweet, dry scent of decaying paper. It was the smell of secrets. I pulled the door closed behind me, leaving just a hair-width crack so I would not be trapped. I did not dare turn on the overhead light. Instead, I used the screen of my phone, turning the brightness down to the lowest setting. The shadows danced across the stacks of boxes. I found them again. H. Mercer. Foundation files. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knelt down in front of the box. I lifted the lid. Inside, it was chaotic. Bank statements, legal drafts, glossy brochures for housing developments. But right on top, there was a folder labeled Ridgeview. Monday. I reached for it. Thump. The sound came from directly above me. The ceiling creaked. Dust motes danced in the pale light of my phone screen. Footsteps, heavy ones, pacing. Then, the muffled sound of a voice through the floorboards. I am going to check the breaker, a male voice said. The lights in the media room are flickering. Graham. He was coming downstairs. Panic flared in my chest, hot and blinding. If he found me here, in the dark, going through their files. I could run. I could try to make it back to the laundry room before he reached the bottom of the stairs. But Harold's voice was in my head again. Strategy. Running was guilty. Running was weak. I did not run. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the voice memo app. I hit the big red button. Recording. I shoved the phone deep into the kangaroo pocket of my hoodie, making sure the microphone was facing out. I sat back on my heels, looking at the box of files. I was not going to steal the files. That was theft. I was going to audit them. I took a slow, silent breath. Let him come down. Let him see the light under the door. Let him open it. From this moment on, I was a recording device. I was a camera. I was a witness. The footsteps on the stairs got louder. Creak, thump, creak. I waited in the dark, my hand resting on the lid of the box that contained my grandfather's life, and prepared to start the war. The footsteps on the stairs stopped. I held my breath, crouching in the narrow gap between a stack of moth-eaten curtains and the wall of banker's boxes. My heart was beating so hard against my ribs I was terrified the sound would echo in the small, dry room. Above me, the floorboards groaned. Then the footsteps moved away, heading toward the utility panel on the far side of the basement. Graham was checking the breaker box. Just as he had said, I had minutes, maybe less. I turned my attention back to the open box in front of me. The label read, Mercer, Personal, Harbor Light. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady as I rifled through the papers. This was not just a box of documents. It was an autopsy of a living man's life. There were bank statements from 3 years ago showing the sale of Mercer shipyards. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars that had been moved, split, and funneled into the Harbor Light Foundation. I saw medical records from Dr. Aris, Harold's neurologist, with notes in the margins that looked suspiciously like Vivian's handwriting, highlighting phrases like mild cognitive decline, while ignoring the parts that said patient is alert and oriented. Then I found it. Tucked between a copy of the Foundation's bylaws and a stack of old tax returns was a single, crisp white envelope. It was not mailed. It was hand-delivered. I slid the paper out. It was an invoice. Ridgeview Notary Services. Client Vivian Hart. Reference Harold Mercer. Power of Attorney Trust Transfer. Date of service: Monday, November 27th. Time, 9 o'clock in the morning. Fee: $2,500 expedited. Pre-review. I stared at the paper. The ink was black and sharp. This was the smoking gun. In the audio from the baby monitor, Graham had mentioned the Monday morning appointment, but audio could be argued away. They could claim they were joking, or talking about a hypothetical scenario. This piece of paper proved intent. It proved they had already paid for the service. They had bought the stamp that would sign away Harold's life before he had even agreed to hold the pen. I reached for my phone to take a picture. I needed this. This was the key to everything. As I raised the phone, the screen's backlight washed over the dark corner of the shelving unit. Something glinted. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible reflection. I froze. I moved my phone light just a fraction of an inch to the left. Plugged into a dusty power strip on the bottom shelf was a black USB wall charger. It looked generic, the kind you buy at a gas station for $10. But there was no cord plugged into it, and right in the center of the black plastic, hidden behind a piece of semi-transparent glass, was a pinprick of blue light. It blinked, once, twice. A cold sensation washed over my skin that had nothing to do with the basement draft. It was a camera, a Wi-Fi nanny cam. It was positioned perfectly to capture the entire room. The lens was wide-angle, pointed directly at the stack of boxes labeled with Harold's name. Vivian was not just stealing from her father. She was paranoid enough to surveil the evidence. She knew exactly what she was doing was illegal. And she was terrified someone, maybe a cleaner, maybe Logan, maybe even Brianna, would try to leverage it against her. If the camera saw me holding the invoice, the game was over. They would storm down here, take the phone, destroy the paper, and throw me out on the street before I could upload a single byte of data. I lowered the phone slowly, keeping it close to my chest. Think, Nora. Think like an architect. Sightlines, angles. I shifted my weight. Pretending to stumble slightly, I let out a soft, tired sigh, acting like a bored snooper rather than a frantic investigator. I leaned my shoulder against the shelving unit, positioning my torso directly between the camera lens and the open box. I was the obstruction, shielded by the bulk of my own body. I pulled the invoice out of the folder again. I held it low, near my knees, in the shadow of my legs. I tapped the camera icon on my phone. Click. I flipped the page. Click. I took a photo of the Harbor Light Bylaws cover page. Click. I took a photo of the medical records with Vivian's handwriting. My hands were sweating, making the phone slippery. I shoved the papers back into the envelope. I placed the envelope back exactly where I found it, between the bylaws and the tax returns. I closed the lid of the box. I aligned the edges perfectly with the dust outline on the shelf. I stepped away from the shelf, moving out of the camera's block. I looked around the room one last time, feigning disinterest, then slipped out the door. I did not fully close it. I left it exactly as I had found it. Latch barely resting against the strike plate, a hair's breadth from being locked. I moved through the dark hallway like a ghost. The floorboards felt like landmines waiting to detonate under my feet. I made it back to the laundry room and eased the door shut, leaning against it, gasping for air. Safe. I was safe. I looked across the small, cramped room at my makeshift bed. The air mattress was looking more pathetic by the minute. Above it, on the wall, was an electrical outlet. Plugged into the top socket was a black USB charger. I stopped breathing. I had seen it earlier and thought nothing of it, just a convenient place to charge my phone. But now, looking at it with open eyes, I saw the faint, rhythmic pulse of the blue LED. It was the same model. It was pointed directly at the mattress. Vivian had a camera in the storage room to watch her secrets, and she had a camera in the laundry room to watch the help, to watch me. A wave of violation crashed over me, so intense it made me nauseous. She was watching me sleep. She was watching me change clothes. Every moment I had spent in this room, feeling miserable and alone, had been broadcast to a server somewhere, viewable on her phone whenever she wanted to check if the charity case was behaving. I wanted to rip it out of the wall and smash it with the heel of my boot. I wanted to scream until the glass in the windows shattered. No. Harold's voice whispered in my mind. Do not smash the lens. Use it. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, keeping my back to the camera. I felt exposed, like an animal in a zoo enclosure. I pulled my hoodie up, hiding my face. Then I heard it. Footsteps. They were coming down the stairs again, but these were not the hesitant, checking the breaker footsteps from before. These were heavy, purposeful. They came down the hallway. They stopped right outside the laundry room door. I stared at the brass doorknob. I willed it not to turn. The knob rotated slowly. I held my breath. Then came the sound. Click. It was a dry metallic snap, the sound of a deadbolt sliding home. He had locked me in. I scrambled off the mattress and rushed to the door. I grabbed the handle and twisted. It was rigid, locked from the outside. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Uncle Logan Graham. The door is stuck." There was no answer. Just the sound of footsteps walking away, back toward the stairs. Then, the darkness fell. The overhead fluorescent light flickered once and died. The hum of the dryer cut out instantly. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. He had flipped the breaker for the basement. I was standing in absolute pitch blackness, no windows, one locked door. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, like all the oxygen had been sucked out with the light. Panic, sharp and primal, clawed at my throat. I was trapped. I was locked in a basement with no power, in a house where people were planning a high-stakes financial crime. What if they never opened the door? What if this was how they dealt with the problem? What if a fire started? My breathing came in short, shallow gasps. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the stagnant air. The beam hit the wall outlet. The blue LED on the camera was still blinking. It had a battery backup. Of course it did. They cut the power to the room, to me. but they kept the power to the eye that was watching me. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was not enough to imprison me. They had to observe my fear. They wanted to see me pound on the door. They wanted to see me cry. They wanted footage of the unstable, desperate niece having a breakdown, just in case they needed to discredit me later. I lowered the flashlight. I forced my breathing to slow down. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. They think you are weak, I whispered to myself. They think you are a bug in a jar. I looked at the camera. The blinking blue light looked like a mocking eye. If I panicked, they won. If I screamed, they won. I was not going to scream. I looked around the room, the flashlight beams sweeping over the piles of dirty linens and detergent bottles. My eyes landed on an empty cardboard box in the corner, left over from a Costco run. I walked over and tore the flap off the box. It was a piece of corrugated cardboard, about 2 feet wide. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick black Sharpie, my drafting pen. I sat cross-legged on the floor, in the center of the room, illuminated only by the cold glow of my phone. I uncapped the pen. I wrote in big block letters. The marker squeaked against the cardboard, a defiant sound in the silence. They filmed their own crime. I stared at the words. It was not a plea for help. It was a statement of fact. It was a caption for the movie they were directing. I propped the cardboard sign up against the washing machine, facing the camera. It was subtle. In the dark, the camera might not pick it up clearly yet, but when the lights came back on, or when the infrared night vision kicked in fully, it would be the first thing they saw. I turned off my phone flashlight to save the battery. The darkness rushed back in, absolute and terrifying. I felt my way back to the mattress. I lay down, but I did not get under the covers. I took my phone. I opened the voice recorder app again. I started a new recording. I whispered into the microphone, my lips brushing against the cold glass of the screen. My name is Nora Rivera. It is Friday, November 24th, roughly 1 o'clock in the morning. I am currently locked in the laundry room of the Hart residence at Maple Harbor. The power has been cut from the outside. I have photographed evidence of a conspiracy to defraud the Harbor Light Foundation. There are cameras in this room and the storage room. If anything happens to me, check the cloud backup for the photos. I stopped the recording. I named the file, Locked in Proof. I felt the seams of the air mattress. There was a gap between the plastic bladder and the foam topper I had thrown over it. I slid the phone deep into that crevice, positioning it so the microphone was facing outward toward the door, but the device itself was completely hidden from view. I tapped the screen one last time to ensure it was recording continuously. Then I lay still in the dark. The room smelled of bleach and fear. The silence was so deep I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. But I was not just a prisoner anymore. I had turned the room into a black box flight recorder. Let them come back. Let them open the door. Let them say whatever they wanted. Every word, every threat, every lie would be caught. I watched the blue light of the camera blink in the darkness. Blink, blink, blink. I am watching you too, I thought, and I waited for the sun to rise. For 3 hours. The only clock I had was the dripping of a condensation pipe behind the drywall. Drip, drip, drip. It was a metronome counting down the seconds of my imprisonment. Upstairs, the house had finally fallen silent. The heavy footsteps had ceased. The floorboards stopped groaning. The hearts were asleep in their 400 thread count sheets, secure in the knowledge that their problem was locked in the basement with the dirty towels. I stopped the recording on my phone. I saved the file as laundry-proof. My battery was hovering at 18%. I held the phone up, searching for a signal. The concrete foundation of the house was acting like a Faraday cage. 1 bar of LTE flickered in and out, teasing me. I could not load a web page. I could not send an email with a heavy attachment. But then I remembered the app, Eldercare Connect. It was designed to be low bandwidth. It transmitted simple data packets, heart rate, GPS coordinates, voice calls over a compressed VoIP channel. It was the lifeline I used to keep track of Harold. I opened it. The green dot pulsing at Silver Maple Assisted Living was steady. I hesitated. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Calling him now might confuse him. It might scare him. The doctor said his sleep cycles were fragile, but I was alone in the dark, and the silence was starting to feel heavy enough to crush my chest. I pressed the call button. I expected it to ring 10 times. I expected to hear his voicemail, or the groggy, disoriented voice of a man woken from a medicated sleep. It rang once. "Nora?" Harold's voice came through the speaker. It was not a question. It was not sleepy. It was sharp, alert, and terrifyingly calm. "Grandpa," I whispered, pressing the phone to my ear. "I am so sorry to wake you. You are locked in the laundry room at Vivian's house," he interrupted. "Is that correct?" I froze. The phone almost slipped from my sweaty palm. I looked around the pitch-black room, illuminated only by the mocking blue eye of the camera on the wall. "How?" I stammered. "How do you know that—" "Because I am looking at the map, Nora," he said. "Did you really think I let you install a tracking app on my phone without understanding how the permissions worked?" I blinked in the darkness. I set it up to monitor you. "And I reversed the administrative privileges 2 years ago," Harold said. "I gave myself mirror access. I can see your location relative to mine. I have been watching you for months." My mouth fell open. "You have been tracking me." "I have been conducting surveillance on my investments," he corrected. "And you are the only investment I have left that is worth a damn." He paused, and I heard the sound of a chair shifting, as if he were sitting up at a desk. "I have watched the pattern, Nora," he continued, his voice low and steady. "Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, your dot goes to Maple Harbor and sits in the service wing of the house for 14 hours a day. Vivian's dot goes to the country club, Brianna's dot goes to the mall, Logan's dot goes to the golf course. You stay still. You stay in the kitchen. You stay in the basement. I suspected they were treating you like staff. Tonight, when your signal didn't move from the laundry quadrant for 4 hours straight, I knew they had escalated from exploitation to containment." I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Grandpa, they locked the door. They cut the power. They have cameras." "I know," he said. "Do not cry. Do not give that camera anything it can use. If you cry, they will paint you as hysterical. If you scream, they will call it a mental break. You sit still. You breathe. We are not victims here. Nora, we are simply gathering data. They are trying to steal everything," I whispered, the words tumbling out of me now. "I heard them. On the baby monitor, Vivian and Graham Doyle. They have a plan to transfer the Harbor Light Foundation assets. They said you are senile. They said you will sign anything." "I am aware," Harold said. The nonchalance in his voice stopped me cold. You are aware. Why do you think I hired Dana Rivers?" he asked. "Who?" "Dana Rivers," he repeated. "She is a forensic accountant and a litigator who specializes in white-collar financial crimes. She has been on my payroll for 6 weeks." I leaned my head back against the cold metal of the washing machine. My reality was shifting so fast I was getting vertigo. The man I thought was a helpless retiree was running a counterintelligence operation from his nursing home bed. "I do not understand," I said. "Everyone says you are broke. Vivian says she pays for your room. She says the shipyard sale was a disaster." "The shipyard sale was a triumph," Harold said, a touch of pride entering his voice. "I sold at the peak of the market. I netted $85 million after tax." $85 million, I repeated, the number feeling heavy and alien on my tongue. "I moved it all," he said. "I put every cent into the Harbor Light Foundation. I structured it so I was the sole trustee. Living on a modest stipend, I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see who would visit me when I had nothing to offer them but my company. I wanted to see who would bring me a coffee because they loved me, and who would stop calling because the checkbook was closed." The silence stretched between us. I thought about the times I had visited him, bringing him cheap magazines and smuggled chocolates, worrying about how to pay for his extra blankets. I thought about Vivian, complaining about the cost of his basic care package. They failed the test. didn't they? I said. They failed spectacularly, Harold said. But failing a moral test is one thing. Attempting to forge a digital signature is another. They forged your signature. My bank flagged a request 3 days ago, Harold explained. An attempt to open a new trust account. The authorization carried a digital signature that looked like mine, but the metadata was wrong. It was a copy-paste job. Amateur hour. That was when I called Dana. Grandpa, I said, feeling the urgency return. It is worse than that. I found an invoice in the storage room from Ridgeview Notary Services for Monday morning at 9 o'clock. They have a pre-review appointment for a power of attorney. They are going to make you sign away the foundation. Ah, Harold said. Monday. Good. That gives us a timeline. What do we do? I asked. I am trapped in here. For now, you wait, Harold commanded. Listen to me carefully. Nora, this is not a family dispute anymore. This is a tactical operation, and I am promoting you. Promoting me? You are no longer just my granddaughter, he said. As of this moment, I am appointing you as the acting project manager of the Harbor Light Recovery Initiative. I sat up straighter. The fear that had been paralyzing me began to recede, replaced by the cold, hard focus I used when I was drafting blueprints. What are my instructions, sir? I asked. I could hear the smile in his voice. That is my girl. First, check your text messages. I just sent you a confirmation code. I pulled the phone away from my ear and checked the notifications. A text had come through via the app's secure messaging feature. Confirmation Crown View Hotel. Reservation for guest of H.M. Suite 4801. Penthouse level. Check-in immediate. The Crown View. I gasped. That place costs a fortune. It is owned by a subsidiary of the Foundation, Harold said. I keep the penthouse for contingencies. It is your base of operations now. How do I get there? I asked. I am still locked in. They will open the door in the morning, Harold said. Vivian is cruel, but she is cowardly. She won't starve you. She wants you to feel small, not dead, when she unlocks that door, probably around 6 o'clock to minimize witnesses. You are going to walk out. And say what? Say nothing, Harold said. Do not argue. Do not demand an explanation. Do not ask for breakfast. You simply pick up your bag, walk to your car, and leave. You look through them as if they are made of glass. It will terrify them more than any scream ever could. Okay, I said. Walk out. Drive away. Turn on your dash cam before you start the engine, he added. Record your exit. We need to establish a timeline of your departure to prove you were detained against your will overnight. And Nora, yes. Before you leave that room, I need you to get one more piece of evidence. Photograph the invoice you found. Photograph the layout of the room showing the lock and the lack of windows. We need to build a case that this was false imprisonment. I already got the invoice, I said. I had to block the camera with my body, but I got it. Excellent, Harold said. You have good instincts. Now, get some rest. Or try to. You have a big day tomorrow. Grandpa, I said, my voice wavering just a little. Why did you wait so long? Why did you let them treat you like this? There was a long pause on the line. Because I hoped I was wrong, he said softly. I kept hoping one of them would come to the nursing home just to talk. I hoped that if I gave them enough rope, they would weave a safety net instead of a noose. But I was wrong, and a good architect knows when to condemn a building. We are going to tear it down, I said. We are going to dismantle it, he corrected. Brick by brick, with paperwork, with the law, and with the absolute certainty that we are right. We do not get revenge by shouting. Nora, we get revenge by choosing who manages the money. And starting tonight, that person is you. I will see you tomorrow, I said. See you at the top, he replied. 48th floor. Do not be late. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The silence in the room rushed back in, but it did not feel empty anymore. It felt pregnant with possibility. I looked at the blinking blue light of the camera on the wall. Blink, blink. Enjoy the show, I whispered to the lens. Because it is the last thing you are ever going to see of me. I put the phone back under the mattress lip. Keeping the recorder running, I pulled my knees to my chest and closed my eyes. I did not sleep. But I rested. I rested like a soldier in a trench waiting for dawn. I visualized the blueprints of the house. I visualized the path to the garage. I visualized the face of the notary on Monday morning, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel poor. I felt dangerous. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the sound of a lock tumbling was louder than a gunshot. I was awake. Of course, I had been awake for hours, staring at the blinking blue eye of the camera, waiting for them to make their move. I was curled in a tight ball on the corner of the deflated mattress, shivering in the damp cold of the unheated basement. The doorknob turned slowly. I tensed, my hands slipping instinctively into the pocket of my hoodie where my phone lay hidden, the recording app still running. The door creaked open about 6 inches. A hand reached in pale, manicured, likely Vivian's, and tossed a bundle of fabric onto the floor. It was an old, moth-eaten wool blanket that smelled of mildew and dog hair. "Stay quiet," a voice hissed. It was her. "The Doyles are sleeping." The door closed. But this time, the deadbolt did not slide home. I waited. I counted to 60 in my head, listening to the silence settle back over the house. The only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator upstairs and the blood rushing in my own ears. I pulled my phone out. I stopped the recording I had named Locked in Proof. I checked the battery. 14%. It was enough. I stood up, my joints popping from the cold. I did not touch the blanket she had thrown. It was not a kindness. It was an insult. It was a way of saying, "We know you are freezing, but you are not worth the guest linens." I grabbed my duffel bag. I moved to the door and pushed it open with a single finger. The hallway was empty. The darkness was absolute, save for the faint gray light of pre-dawn filtering in from the small window in the garage entry. I could have left right then. I could have run to my car and sped away. But I was not running away. I was gathering ammunition. I slipped off my sneakers, holding them in my left hand to move silently in my socks. I crept down the hallway toward the storage room. The door was still ajar. Exactly as I had left it, I slipped inside. I did not turn on the light. I used the glow of my phone screen, shielded by my palm, to navigate to the box marked Mercer. Personal. Harbor Light. I knew where the camera was now. I knew its blind spots. I knelt on the floor, positioning my body to block the lens on the shelf. I opened the box. My hands moved with a precision that surprised me. I found the envelope. I pulled out the invoice from Ridgeview Notary Services. I held it flat against the concrete floor, out of the camera's sightline. I took 3 photos, one of the header with Vivian's name, one of the date and time Monday, 9 o'clock in the morning, one of the service description pre-review power of attorney. I shoved the invoice back. I dug deeper. I found the draft of the power of attorney document itself. I flipped to the last page. There was a digital signature printed at the bottom. Harold Mercer. I zoomed in with my camera. Even in the low light, I could see the pixelation Graham had mentioned. It was a copy-paste job. I snapped a macro shot of the signature, then a wide shot of the whole page. I closed the box. I dusted the lid to remove my fingerprints. I backed out of the room, leaving the door exactly as slightly ajar as it had been. I went to the garage door. This was the servants' entrance, the one the cleaning crew and the nannies used. It was never locked from the inside because, in the worldview of the Harts, the help needed to be able to leave, but no one would ever try to break in through the mudroom. I stepped out into the cool morning air. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun just hinting at the horizon. The driveway was filled with cars that cost more than houses. Vivian's white Range Rover, Logan's black Porsche. They looked like sleeping beasts, heavy and arrogant. I wove through them, reaching my battered sedan parked behind the hedge. I got in. The leather of my steering wheel was cracked, and the car smelled of old coffee, but it smelled like freedom. I did not start the engine yet. I plugged my phone into the charger, then I reached up and tapped the power button on my dash cam. I waited for the little red light to blink. "Record," I whispered. I started the car. The engine sputtered, then caught with a loud roar that seemed deafening in the quiet neighborhood. I did not care if I woke them up. Let them look out the window and see me leaving. Let them think I was fleeing in shame. I backed out, angling the car so the dashcam swept across the front of the house. The timestamp on the screen read 5:18 a.m., November 24th. Leaving the premises of Vivian Hart, I said clearly for the microphone. I was locked in the laundry room from approximately 1 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the morning. I am now proceeding to a secure location. I drove past the manicured lawns and the security gates. I drove until the wrought iron fences of Maple Harbor were just a blur in my rearview mirror. 40 minutes later, I pulled into the circular driveway of the Crown View Hotel in downtown Grayport. It was a different universe. Maple Harbor smelled of mulch and judgment. The Crown View smelled of white tea and old money. The valet who opened my car door did not look at the rust on the wheel well or the dent in the fender. He looked me in the eye and smiled. "Welcome to the Crown View, Ms. Rivera," he said. "We have been expecting you." I handed him my keys, feeling a strange sense of vertigo. I was wearing a hoodie and jeans that I had slept in on a basement floor. My hair was a mess. I looked like a disaster, but here I was a guest of Harold Mercer. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of silence. The floors were marble, polished to a mirror shine. A massive chandelier made of hundreds of glass teardrops hung from the ceiling. The receptionist did not ask for a credit card. She simply typed my name, glanced at a note on her screen, and handed me a heavy black key card. "Mr. Mercer has arranged for the penthouse suite," she said, her voice hushed and professional. "The elevator is to your right. You will need to scan your card to access the 48th floor." I took the card. It felt warm in my hand. The elevator ride was smooth and fast. My ears popped as the numbers climbed. 10, 20, 30, 40. When the doors slid open on the 48th floor, I stepped out into a foyer that was larger than my entire apartment. There was only one door. I swiped the card. The lock clicked a soft, expensive sound, nothing like the harsh snap of the laundry room bolt. I pushed the door open. I stopped breathing for a second. The suite was not a room. It was a kingdom. The far wall was entirely glass, 2 stories high, looking out over the waking city and the steel-gray waters of the harbor. The sun was just breaking over the skyline, flooding the space with golden light. The floor was light oak. There was a fireplace fueled by gas flickering softly in the center of the room. A kitchen with a massive granite island stood to the left, fully stocked. To the right, a spiral staircase led up to a lofted bedroom. I dropped my duffel bag on a leather armchair that looked like it had never been sat in. I walked to the window. Down there, somewhere in the grid of streets, was the pawn shop where I had tried to sell my books. Down there was my tiny, cold apartment. Down there was the life where I was powerless. Up here, the air was filtered and the silence was heavy with potential. I went upstairs to the bathroom. It was lined with slate and chrome. I turned on the shower. The water pressure was incredible. I stripped off my clothes. The clothes that smelled of Vivian's basement, and stepped under the spray. I scrubbed my skin until it was pink. I washed the smell of bleach and fear out of my hair. I stood there for 20 minutes, just letting the hot water hammer against my back, washing away the poor relation and revealing the project manager underneath. I wrapped myself in a thick white robe that hung on a heated rack. I walked back down to the living room. The digital clock on the microwave read 9 o'clock. Exactly on the minute. The doorbell rang. I opened it. Standing there was a woman who looked like she could cut glass with her jawline. She was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair was pulled back in a low, severe ponytail. She was holding a silver aluminum briefcase in one hand and a travel mug in the other. "Nora Rivera?" she asked. Her voice was crisp, efficient. "Yes," I said. "I am Dana Rivers," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We have a lot of work to do and very little time to do it." She walked straight to the dining table, which was a slab of raw edge walnut. and set down the briefcase. She snapped the latches open. Inside, there was no paper. It was all tech. A ruggedized laptop, a portable high-speed scanner, several encrypted hard drives, a portable printer. "Coffee?" she asked, pulling a second thermos out of her tote bag. "Harold said you take it black." "Thank you," I said, taking the cup. It was hot and strong. Dana sat down and opened the laptop. "Okay." Harold briefed me on the basics, but I need the raw data. Start from the beginning, the baby monitor, the files, everything. I sat across from her. I pulled my phone out of my robe pocket. "I have audio," I said. 2 files, one of the conversation between Vivian, Logan, and Graham Doyle planning the transfer, one of me establishing the timeline of my confinement. Dana nodded, plugging a cable into my phone. "Transferring now. What else?" "Photos," I said. I found the invoice for the notary and the draft of the power of attorney with the signature. Dana's eyes widened slightly as the images popped up on her screen. She clicked on the photo of the invoice, zooming in. "Ridgeview Notary," she muttered. "Monday morning. That is aggressive. They are trying to beat the end-of-year tax audit cycle." She looked at the photo of the signature. She tapped the screen. "That is a trace," she said instantly. "See the jitter in the loop of the M that is digital artifacting. A human hand flows. A scanner pixelates. This is clumsy." She looked up at me. "This is good. Nora, this is very good." "Is it enough?" I asked. "Can we stop them?" "We have enough for a temporary injunction," Dana said, typing rapidly. "I can get a judge to freeze the foundation's assets by noon based on the suspicion of fraud. We can trigger an investigation by the district attorney into elder abuse." She stopped typing and looked at me. "But if we stop them now, they will claim it was a misunderstanding. They will claim the draft was just a proposal they never intended to use. They will throw Graham Doyle under the bus and say he gave them bad advice. Vivian and Logan might walk away with a slap on the wrist." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We let them walk into the trap," she said. "We need to catch them in the act of execution. We need them to present that forged document to a notary and attempt to certify it. Once they try to use the document, it is not just conspiracy anymore. It is active fraud. It is a felony committed in front of a witness." The large screen on the wall suddenly chimed. A video call was incoming. The caller ID read H. Mercer. Dana picked up a remote and clicked accept. Harold's face filled the 60-inch screen. He was not in a hospital bed. He was sitting in a small, tidy office. Behind him, there was a whiteboard covered in timelines written in red and blue marker. He was wearing a pressed button-down shirt and a cardigan. He looked tired. His skin was pale, but his eyes were sharp and focused. "Good morning, team," Harold said. His voice was clear over the high-quality speakers. "Nora, how is the view from the 48th floor?" "It is different," I said, my voice catching slightly. "It is a lot better than the laundry room." "I imagine it is," Harold said. He looked at Dana. "What is the verdict, Counselor?" "The evidence is solid, Harold," Dana said. "Nora got the invoice. We have the time and place. Monday, 9 o'clock, Ridgeview." "Graham Doyle is a creature of habit," Harold mused. "He always uses Ridgeview because Lake, the notary there, is lazy. He does not ask questions as long as the check clears." "We have a choice," Dana said, leaning back. "We can file the injunction now and shut it down, or we can let the appointment proceed." Harold looked at me through the screen. "What do you think, project manager? What is the play?" I thought about the cold basement. I thought about the blue light of the camera watching me sleep. I thought about Vivian's fake tears and Logan's arrogance about restructuring the charity to buy sports cars. "If we stop them now, they survive," I said. "They just find another way to bleed you dry. They wait until you actually get sick, or they find a better lawyer." I looked at the timeline on the whiteboard behind him. "We have to let them go to the meeting," I said. We have to let them sit down at that table. We have to let them think they have won. Harold smiled. It was a shark smile. And then, he asked. And then we walk in, I said. With the police. Harold nodded. Correct. But we need to control the environment. Dana, can you get to Mr. Lake at Ridgeview before Monday? I can flip him, Dana said calmly. If I show him the evidence of the forgery and tell him he is an accessory to a federal crime, he will cooperate. He will let us set the room up. Set the room up, I asked. Cameras, Harold said. Microphones. Witnesses. We are not just going to stop a meeting, Nora. We are going to hold a trial, and we are going to do it before they even realize the gavel has come down. He leaned closer to the camera. Now, Harold said, let us talk about lunch. I believe you have some family members who are very confused about where you went. It is time to invite them to the penthouse. Invite them, I asked, shocked. Here. They think you ran away, Harold said. They think you are cowering in your apartment. Let us show them you upgraded. Post a picture, tag the location. Let them wonder how the girl who sold her books for food is suddenly staying in the most expensive suite in the city. Bait, I said, realizing his plan. Exactly, Harold said. Lure them in, make them nervous, make them sloppy, and while they are staring at your view, Dana will be recording every lie they tell. I looked out the window at the city below. The morning sun was shining on the glass towers. I touched the key card in my pocket. Okay, I said. I will take the photo. Good, Harold said. Welcome to the board of directors. Nora. The morning light streaming through the 2-story windows of the penthouse was merciless. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air and the grim expression on Dana Rivers' face. She was hunched over the glass dining table, her laptop screen casting a cold blue glow against her skin. On the table lay the high-resolution scan of the power of attorney document I had photographed in the basement. It is too smooth, Dana said, tapping a manicured fingernail against the screen. Look at the tail of the D in Harold. A human hand has micro-tremors. Especially at 84 years old, even on a good day, there is variance in pressure. This is mathematically perfect. It is a vector path, not a pen stroke. So it is a forgery, I said, pouring myself a second cup of black coffee. My hands were finally steady, the adrenaline of the escape settling into a cold, hard focus. It is a digital trace, Dana corrected. They took a legitimate signature from an old document, probably a tax return or a check, scanned it, vectorized it, and pasted it onto the PDF before printing. To the naked eye, it looks real. To a bank's fraud algorithm, it might pass if the amount was small, but for a total asset transfer, it is risky. Graham Doyle is either desperate or arrogant. He is arrogant, I said. He thinks Grandpa is a vegetable and I am a ghost. I looked at the signature again. We needed more than just Dana's opinion. We needed an independent forensic confirmation. I know a guy, I said suddenly. Malik Stone. Dana looked up. Who is Malik Stone? We went to undergrad together, I explained. He was a computer science major who was obsessed with cryptography. He works for the state now, in the Department of Digital Forensic Analysis. He validates e-signatures for government contracts. Dana raised an eyebrow. Can you get him to look at this without triggering a state-level inquiry before we are ready? I looked at the screen where Harold was still watching us via the video link. He nodded slowly. Use the network. Nora, Harold said, but keep it off the official books. We want an opinion, not a raid, not yet. Dana reached into her aluminum briefcase and tossed me a cheap, plastic flip phone, a burner. Call him, she said. Do not use your personal line. Send him the file through an encrypted drop link. Strip the metadata first. I dialed Malik's number from memory. He picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy. It was Saturday morning, after all. This line is unlisted, he said suspiciously. Who is this? It is Nora, I said. Nora Rivera. Don't hang up. Nora. His tone softened instantly. I haven't heard from you since graduation. Why are you calling me from a number that comes up as unknown? I need a favor. Malik. A big one. And a quiet one. I explained the situation without using names. I told him I had a relative whose signature was being used to authorize a massive transfer of funds, and I suspected it was a digital fabrication. I told him I needed a stroke analysis run on a high-resolution image. I cannot run private files through state servers. Nora, Malik said, his voice tight. That is a violation of protocol. I could lose my clearance. I am not asking for an official report, I pleaded. I just need you to look at the pressure mapping. You have that open-source software you wrote yourself, right? The one you used to brag about in the dorms. There was a long silence on the other end, then a sigh. Send it to my private Proton mail, he said. Strip the names. If anyone asks, I am analyzing a sample for a lecture on fraud detection. Thank you, I whispered. I owe you dinner. Expensive dinner. You owe me a whole bottle of good whiskey, he corrected, and hung up. While we waited for Malik, Dana went on the offensive. She opened a new window on her laptop and began typing furiously. I am filing an emergency ex parte motion with the probate court, she narrated as she typed. We are requesting an immediate temporary restraining order on the Harbor Light Foundation accounts and the personal accounts of Vivian Hart and Logan Price. I am citing credible evidence of elder abuse, financial malfeasance, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Will a judge sign that on a holiday weekend? I asked. With the evidence you got from the basement? Dana smirked. A judge would sign this in the middle of his own wedding. I am also flagging the transfer request at the bank level. I am calling the fraud department at Sovereign Trust. She put the phone on speaker as she navigated the bank's automated system. She entered Harold's account number and the passkey he had provided. Before she could even ask for a representative, a robotic voice cut in. Alert! This account has been flagged for suspicious activity. A high-risk transaction attempted on Wednesday, November 22nd, has been suspended pending verification. Please contact the Fraud Prevention Unit immediately. Dana looked at me and smiled. It was a predatory smile. The bank's algorithm beat us to it, she said. Graham's copy-paste job triggered their internal red flags. That is perfect. It means we have third-party validation that the signature looked wrong. 5 minutes later, my burner phone buzzed. It was a text from Malik. It was short, brutal, and beautiful. Subject analysis complete, match negative. 100%, source high-resolution scan, likely 600 dpi. Traced from a document dated circa 2019, based on ink degradation levels. Pressure variance, 0. This is a flat image, not a pen stroke. Verdict, this is a Class B felony in this state. Whoever made this is either an idiot or desperate. Do not let them near a bank. I read the message aloud, on the wall screen. Harold closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the sadness was gone, replaced by a weary resolve. Well, Harold said quietly, we have the backbone of the case. Now we need the meat. We need them to admit it. How, I asked. If the bank already blocked it, they will know something is wrong. They do not know why it was blocked, Dana explained. They likely think it was just a standard security check or a glitch. Graham will be telling them right now that they just need to force it through with a notarized hard copy. That is why the Monday appointment is so critical to them. We need to get them here, Harold said. We need to get them into this room, feeling comfortable, feeling safe. We need them to brag. He looked at me. Cast the line. Nora. I took a deep breath. I walked over to the corner of the room where a plush velvet armchair sat next to a bookshelf. I arranged a stack of my urban planning textbooks on the small side table, the same books I had almost sold for $12. I placed a cup of tea next to them. I framed the shot carefully, so it showed the luxury of the Crown View penthouse, the high ceilings, the expensive furniture, a sliver of the view, but nothing that explicitly identified the building or the room number. I snapped the photo. I opened Instagram. I typed the caption, Grandpa surprised me with a quiet place to study, so I can work in peace for the rest of the weekend. So grateful for family who supports education. I hit post. I waited. It took less than 3 minutes. My phone lit up with a notification, a comment from Brianna. Wait, what is this? Where are you? Grandpa paid for this, followed by the eyes wide open emoji. Then came the text to the family group chat. Brianna. Did anyone see Nora's story? She is in a hotel suite that looks like it costs $5,000 a night. She says Grandpa paid for it. I thought Grandpa was broke. My phone rang. It was Vivian. I looked at Harold. He nodded. Answer it. Be sweet. Be the niece who doesn't know anything about money. I picked up. Hi, Aunt Vivian. Nora. Her voice was a mix of high-pitched concern and barely concealed fury. Where on earth are you? I went down to the laundry room to bring you some breakfast and you were gone. The door was wide open. I am so sorry, Aunt Viv, I said, injecting a tone of apology into my voice. I woke up so early, and the house was so quiet. I didn't want to disturb anyone. And then I saw the message from Grandpa. What message? She snapped. Harold sent you a message. Yes, I said innocently. He said he had some old travel points or something that were about to expire. He wanted to treat me to a room so I could finish my grant proposal without the twins running around. It was so sweet of him. Points, Vivian repeated. I could hear the gears turning in her head. She was trying to calculate if points could pay for a room with 12-foot ceilings. Which hotel is it? Nora. The Crown View. I said. It is really nice. Listen, I feel terrible about leaving without saying goodbye, and I have been thinking, you guys do so much for Grandpa. It isn't fair that you bear the whole burden. It certainly is not, Vivian said, her voice dropping into her usual martyr tone. So, I was wondering, I continued, since I'm here in town, and Grandpa is, well, you know how he is. Maybe you, Brianna, and Logan could come by for a quick lunch, just sandwiches. I want to talk about how I can help. Maybe I can take on some of the care coordination. I want to do my part. There was silence on the other end. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She was thinking that if I got involved in care coordination, I might see the bank statements. She was thinking she needed to come down here and shut me down, discourage me, put me back in my place, and she was dying to see the room. Well, she said slowly, we were planning to go to the club, but I suppose we could stop by, for a short visit, to clear the air. That would be wonderful, I said. How about 1 o'clock I am in suite 4801? 48, Vivian's voice went up an octave. The penthouse level. Is that what it is? I asked vaguely. I just followed the key card. See you at 1. I hung up. She is coming, I said, and she is bringing the whole circus. Excellent, Harold said. Dana, prepare the stage. Dana closed her laptop. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. This is Rivers. I am activating the protocol. I need the unit here in 20 minutes. She looked at me. I spoke with the head of security for the Crown View and the fraud division at the district attorney's office. They are treating this as a sting operation. For the next hour, the penthouse transformed. 2 men in gray jumpsuits arrived carrying tool bags. They looked like maintenance workers, but they moved with the efficiency of military personnel. They replaced the smoke detector above the dining table with one that contained a high-definition 4K camera and a long-range microphone. They swapped the decorative vase on the mantel for one that hid a pinhole lens in the floral arrangement. They placed small, undetectable listening devices under the lip of the marble kitchen island. Every inch of the living and dining area is now covered, one of the technicians said. Audio and video are feeding directly to the van downstairs and to the cloud server. Then, 2 more men arrived. They were large, wearing the dark blazers and earpieces of hotel security. But when one of them turned to speak to Dana, I saw the badge clipped to his belt beneath the jacket. State Bureau of Investigation. We will be stationed outside the door, the agent said. If things get volatile, we breach. Otherwise, we wait for your signal. Ms. Rivers, you have the control. Dana nodded. She looked at me. You are the face, Nora. You open the door. You serve the sandwiches. You play the role of the grateful, confused niece until the trap snaps shut. And Grandpa? I asked. I will be on the screen, Harold said. But keep it off until they are seated. Let them get comfortable. Let them drink the water. Let them talk about how crazy I am. Then, turn me on. I walked to the window. It was 12:45. Down below, a line of black cars was turning into the hotel driveway. I recognized the white Range Rover immediately. They are here, I said. The room went quiet. The technicians had left. The agents were in the hall. Dana sat at the small desk in the corner, looking for all the world like a friend just catching up on work. But her finger was hovering over the record key on her laptop. I smoothed my shirt. I checked my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like the girl who had counted pennies for ramen yesterday. I looked like the person Harold Mercer believed I was. The elevator dinged in the hallway. I walked to the door. I put my hand on the handle. Showtime, I whispered. I opened the door. The digital chime of the penthouse doorbell echoed through the suite at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a soft, melodic sound, vastly different from the harsh buzz of the intercom at my apartment, but it triggered a spike of adrenaline in my chest that felt like a physical blow. I smoothed the front of my simple cotton shirt. I looked at Dana Rivers, who was sitting on the sofa with a relaxed, casual posture that belied the fact that she was a shark waiting for blood in the water. She gave me a single, sharp nod. "Open it," she mouthed. I walked to the massive oak door and pulled it open. The hallway was empty except for the 3 people standing on the welcome mat, looking as if they had just stepped out of a catalog for people who owned yachts but never sailed them. Aunt Vivian was in front, wearing a cream-colored cashmere suit that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was sprayed into a helmet of perfect blonde waves, and she was clutching a quilted leather handbag as if it contained nuclear codes. Behind her stood Brianna, dressed in a shimmering sequined day dress that caught the hallway light, and Logan, wearing a tight polo shirt that struggled to contain his midsection, his face already flushed with the exertion of existing. For a moment, nobody spoke. They did not look at me. They looked past me. Their eyes were fixed on the expanse of glass behind my head, the soaring ceilings, and the panoramic view of Grayport Harbor glittering in the sunlight. "Oh my God," Brianna whispered, breaking the silence. "Hi, Aunt Vivian," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." They drifted into the room like moths drawn to a very expensive flame. Vivian's eyes darted around, pricing everything. She looked at the marble floors, the gas fireplace flickering with blue flames, the baby grand piano in the corner. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was trying to reconcile the niece who slept in her laundry room with the woman standing in a suite that commanded $4,000 a night. "Nora," Vivian said, recovering her composure with a tight, strained smile. "This is quite the upgrade." "Grandpa insisted," I said, keeping my voice light and airy. "He said I needed space to focus." Brianna did not even say hello. She already had her phone out. She walked straight to the window, held the device up, and started recording. "Thanksgiving weekend, penthouse vibes," she narrated to her screen, her voice pitching up into that fake, breathless influencer tone. "Just a casual little family lunch overlooking the city, so blessed." She panned the camera across the room, capturing the view, the furniture, and the spread of food on the table. She carefully angled the shot so that I was completely cut out of the frame. To her followers, this was her life, her suite, her moment. I was just background noise. Logan walked over to the dining table, where I had laid out a platter of club sandwiches, a bowl of garden salad, and a pitcher of ice water. He looked at the food, then at the room, and let out a short, derisive snort. "Turkey sandwiches?" he asked, picking up a quarter of a sandwich and inspecting it suspiciously. "We are in the Crown View penthouse, and we are eating turkey on white bread. It is like a charity canteen in here." "I ordered what I like," I said, taking a seat at the foot of the table. "Please, sit down." "Who is this?" Vivian asked, her eyes finally landing on Dana. Her tone sharpened instantly. I thought you said it was just family. Oh, this is Dana, I said quickly. She is a colleague of mine from Northline Community Works. She happened to be in the city for the holiday, so I invited her to join us. Dana, this is my Aunt Vivian, my cousin Brianna, and her husband Logan. Dana stood up and offered a warm, harmless smile. She was wearing a soft cardigan over her dress shirt, looking every bit the overworked non-profit employee. Nice to meet you all, Dana said. Nora has told me so much about the family. Vivian visibly relaxed. A non-profit worker, a nobody, someone of no consequence who could be ignored. Charmed, Vivian said dismissively, turning her back on Dana to sit at the table. Well, let us make this quick. We have a reservation at the club at 3. They settled into the leather chairs. Brianna propped her phone against the water pitcher, leaving it recording on a time-lapse setting. Logan took a massive bite of his sandwich, chewing with his mouth open while he stared out the window. So, Vivian began, unfolding her napkin with aggressive precision. I assume you wanted to see us to apologize for vanishing this morning. It was very dramatic. Nora, leaving before dawn. The Doyles were quite confused. I didn't mean to cause a scene, I said, pouring water into her glass. I realized I needed to get serious about my work. And speaking of getting serious, that is why I asked you here. I feel guilty. Aunt Viv? Guilty, she asked, raising an eyebrow. About Grandpa, I said. I know how hard it is for you, managing his care, managing the costs. I want to help. I want to understand what the plan is so I can support you. Vivian sighed, a long, tragic sound that seemed rehearsed. She reached for her water glass, her diamond bracelets clinking together. Oh, Nora, you have no idea, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It is heartbreaking, truly heartbreaking. He is just not himself anymore. Is it getting worse? Dana asked gently, leaning forward with an expression of polite concern. Exponentially, Vivian lied, looking Dana straight in the eyes. Just last week, I went to visit him at Silver Maple. He looked right at me and called me Martha. That was his sister who died 20 years ago. He does not know what day it is. He forgets to eat. He tries to sign checks for things he didn't buy. That sounds dangerous, Dana said. Financially dangerous. Exactly, Logan interjected, spraying a few crumbs of bread onto the polished table. The man is a liability. He is sitting on assets he does not even remember he owns. If we do not step in, the state will take it, or some scammer will get him to sign away the farm. So you have to step in, I said, keeping my eyes on my plate. Is that why you are doing the paperwork, the signing thing? Vivian froze for a microsecond, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. She looked at me sharply. What signing thing? She asked. You mentioned it yesterday. I lied smoothly. Or maybe it was Brianna, something about getting the legal authority to help him manage his accounts. Oh, the power of attorney, Vivian said, relaxing. She waved her hand as if shooing away a fly. That is just standard procedure. Nora, it is a protective measure. We are simply formalizing my ability to make decisions for him since he is clearly incapable of doing it himself. It must be a lot of responsibility, Dana observed. Does he understand what he is signing? Vivian let out a sad little laugh. Honey, at this point, you could put a menu in front of him and tell him it is a peace treaty, and he would sign it. He trusts me. I am his daughter. I am the only one looking out for his legacy. His legacy, Logan muttered, smirking. Right. We are going to protect the hell out of that legacy. And the Harbor Light Foundation, I asked. Is that part of the legacy? The room went quiet. The air conditioning hummed softly. I saw Logan exchange a quick glance with Vivian. What do you know about Harbor Light? Logan asked, his voice dropping the jovial act. I study urban planning, I said. Harbor Light funds half the low-income housing projects in the state. I know Grandpa set it up. Is that safe? Or is he confused about that too? Safe, Logan laughed. It was an ugly, wet sound. It is stagnating, Nora, he has millions of dollars sitting in municipal bonds yielding 2% because he wants to build playgrounds for poor kids. It is financial suicide. When we get control, when Vivian gets the stewardship, we are going to fix that. Fix it how? Dana asked. She was not eating. Her hands were folded on the table, but I knew her focus was razor sharp. Restructure, Logan said, leaning back and patting his stomach. We have a strategy. Move the capital into high-yield vehicles, tech derivatives, crypto futures, real growth. By the time we are done, the foundation won't just be a piggy bank for housing projects, it will be a powerhouse. But wouldn't that change the mission? I asked. Grandpa wanted it to support housing. Grandpa does not know what he wants, Brianna chimed in. She was scrolling through her phone, checking the views on her story. Honestly, Nora, why do you care? It is not like you are seeing any of that money, at least this way. The family benefits. I have spent 10 years building a brand. I deserve a little security. If Grandpa really loved us, he would want us to have the lifestyle we deserve, not wasted on concrete blocks for strangers. So the plan is to transfer the foundation to you, Dana asked, looking at Vivian. To your personal control. It is a transfer of trusteeship, Vivian corrected sharply. To a trust that I manage. It is perfectly legal. We have the papers ready. We are meeting the notary on Monday morning at Ridgeview Services to finalize it. Once that stamp hits the paper, it is done. No one can touch it, not the state, and certainly not any bleeding heart critics. Monday morning, I repeated. 9 o'clock. Bright and early, Logan grinned. By noon, the Harbor Light accounts will be empty, and the new portfolio will be live at Seabright Wealth, and then, finally, no one can stop us from using that money the right way. It sounds like you have thought of everything, Dana said. We have, Vivian said, taking a sip of water. We have to. Harold is helpless. He needs us. She looked around the room again, her eyes gleaming with greed. You know, she said, once the transfer is complete, we might keep this suite permanently. It would make a nice city crash pad for Brianna. Harold certainly won't be using it. I think that is a great idea. Mom, Brianna said, I could host launch parties here. I felt a cold rage tightening my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. They had said it. They had admitted it all. The incompetence, the transfer, the intent to gut the charity, the date, the time. It was all recorded on the device hidden in the flower arrangement behind Vivian's head. Well, I said, checking my watch. It is 1:45. I suppose you are right. Grandpa won't be using this suite much longer. Exactly, Logan said. Pass the water. Would you? I did not reach for the pitcher. Instead, the doorbell rang. It was loud in the sudden silence. Vivian jumped slightly. Expecting more company? She asked, frowning. I thought this was private. I did too, I said. Excuse me. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but steady. I walked to the door. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the tension in the room rising, a subconscious reaction to the shift in atmosphere. I unlocked the door. I pulled it open wide. Harold Mercer stood there. He was not leaning on a cane. He was standing straight, his shoulders squared. He was wearing a charcoal three-piece suit that was immaculately tailored, a crisp white shirt, and a silk tie. His hair was combed back. His eyes were clear, blue, and colder than the harbor water below. He did not look like a man who called his daughter by his dead sister's name. He looked like the man who had built a shipping empire with his bare hands. Hello, Nora, he said. His voice was strong, resonating off the high ceilings. Hi, Grandpa, I said. You are right on time. I stepped aside. Harold walked into the penthouse. The sound of a fork hitting a plate shattered the silence. It was Logan. He had dropped his fork, and it clattered onto the china with a violence that made everyone flinch. Brianna's phone slipped from her hand. It hit the glass table face down with a sickening crack. But she did not even look at it. Her mouth was hanging open. Vivian went pale. It was not a gradual paling. The blood drained from her face so instantly that her expensive makeup suddenly looked like clown paint. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "But you are at Silver Maple. It is Saturday. You do not leave on Saturdays." Harold ignored her. He walked past them, his footsteps silent on the thick rug. He walked to the head of the table, the empty seat that presided over the entire room. He pulled out the chair and sat down. He did not slump. He did not shake. He sat with the regal authority of a king returning to a usurped throne. He looked at the half-eaten sandwich on Logan's plate. He looked at the water glass in Vivian's hand. He looked at Brianna's shattered phone. Then, he reached into the breast pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a pen. It was a vintage fountain pen, black and gold, thick and heavy. He placed it on the table with deliberate care. He aligned it perfectly with the edge of the placemat. He folded his hands on the table and looked at Vivian. "I hear you are very concerned about my memory." "Vivian," Harold said. His voice was conversational, polite, but underneath it lay a bedrock of steel. "I hear you told these nice people that I'm confused, that I am helpless, that I need protection." Vivian tried to speak. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Daddy, we were just," Nora said. "Nora invited you to lunch," Harold interrupted gently. "I invited myself to the conversation." He turned his gaze to Logan. Logan shrank back in his chair, pulling his stomach in as if trying to make a smaller target. "And Logan," Harold said, "I was fascinated to hear about your investment strategy. Crypto futures, high-yield derivatives. It sounds very ambitious." "Sir, I was speaking hypothetically," Logan stammered, sweat already beading on his forehead. "Just market theory." "Of course," Harold said. "Hypothetically." He reached out and tapped the fountain pen with his index finger. It made a solid, heavy sound against the glass table. "This is a very special pen," Harold said softly. "It records audio in high definition. It has been recording since I walked in the door, but that is redundant, really, because the smoke detector above your head and the vase behind you have been recording since you walked in." Brianna let out a small, strangled squeak. She looked up at the smoke detector in horror. "Now," Harold said, leaning forward. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I want to hear it directly from you. No hiding behind my granddaughter. No hiding behind lawyers. Look at me." He waited until Vivian forced her terrified eyes to meet his. "Tell me about the plan," Harold commanded. "Tell me about Monday morning. Tell me exactly how you intend to steal my life's work." The silence that followed Harold's demand was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and sharp enough to cut skin. Vivian did not answer him. Instead, she shattered. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, usually deployed when she wanted a table at a fully booked restaurant or when she was trying to return a dress she had already worn. Her face crumpled. Tears, seemingly summoned on command, welled in her eyes. She threw herself out of her chair and rushed to the head of the table, dropping to her knees beside Harold. She grabbed his hand, clutching it between her manicured palms. "Daddy," she sobbed, her voice trembling with a vibration that felt engineered for maximum sympathy. "Oh, Daddy, please stop this. You are scaring me. You are not well. Look at you. You are imagining things. I do everything for you. I sacrifice my life, my social standing, everything, just to make sure you are safe." She looked up at him, her mascara perfectly intact, her eyes pleading. "You do not remember, do you?" she cooed, switching to the tone one uses for a frightened toddler. "You forget things. Daddy, it is the disease. It is making you paranoid." "We never said those things. You are confused. Please, let us just go home. Let us get you back to Silver Maple where the doctors can help you." It was a master class in gaslighting. For a second, I felt a flicker of the old doubt. She was so convincing. If I had not heard the tapes myself, I might have believed her. I might have believed that the confused old man was lashing out at his loving daughter. Harold did not pull his hand away. He did not recoil. He simply let his hand rest in hers, limp and unresponsive, like a piece of driftwood. He did not look at her. He looked at me. His eyes were clear. They were waiting. I looked at Dana. I gave a small nod. Dana hit the spacebar on her laptop. The sound that filled the penthouse was not the crisp, high-definition audio of the room we were standing in. It was hollow. It was damp. It carried the acoustic signature of a concrete box. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of the leaking pipe in the basement echoed through the speakers, amplified to a grotesque volume. Vivian froze. Her hand stopped stroking Harold's knuckles. She turned her head slowly toward the laptop, her expression shifting from tragic grief to animal confusion. Then, the voices started. Graham. The competency evaluation is a gray area. If anyone challenges it later. Vivian. No one is going to challenge it. Who, Brianna? She just wants her check. Logan. He is part of the structure. And Nora. Please. The girl is selling books to buy ramen. The color drained from Brianna's face. She looked at her mother, then at the computer. Logan. A tax write-off for the funeral of a charity. God, I love this country. Logan stopped chewing. His jaw went slack. Vivian, he can hold a pen. I will put the paper in front of him. I will tell him it is an updated insurance form. He trusts me, and even if he hesitates, he is too weak to argue. The recording continued. It played the part about the transfer to Seabright Wealth. It played the part about gutting the housing projects. It played the laughter. Dana hit the space bar again. The audio cut off, leaving the echo of that cruel laughter hanging in the sunlit room like a foul smell. Vivian released Harold's hand as if it had suddenly turned into a burning coal. She scrambled backward, trying to stand up, her heels slipping on the rug. She looked wild, cornered. What is that? Brianna whispered. Her voice was shaking so hard the sequins on her dress vibrated. Mom, what is that? It is a fake, Vivian shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Dana. It is AI. They fabricated it. They are trying to frame me. I stood up. I walked to the edge of the table. It is not a fake, Aunt Vivian, I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of the project manager, assessing the damage. That is the sound of your laundry room. That is the sound of the dripping pipe behind the drywall. And that is the sound of what you said when you thought the only person listening was the girl you locked in the basement. You... Vivian stared at me with pure hatred. You ungrateful little rat. I gave you a place to sleep. You gave me a cell, I corrected. And you gave me a front row seat. Logan slammed his fist onto the table. The cutlery jumped. This is bullshit, he roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. You cannot record people without their consent. It is inadmissible. It is illegal wiretapping. He stood up, knocking his chair backward. He lunged toward Dana, his hand reaching for the laptop. Turn it off. Delete it. Sit down, sir. The voice came from the doorway. It was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The two men who had been standing in the hall, the ones dressed as hotel security, stepped into the room. They moved with a synchronized precision that made Logan freeze in his tracks. One of them pulled his jacket back, revealing the gold badge on his belt. I am Special Agent Miller with the District Attorney's Office, Economic Crimes Division, the man said. And this is Agent Ruiz. We would strongly advise everyone to remain seated. Logan blinked. He looked at the badge, then at Dana, then at Harold. The fight went out of him instantly, replaced by the terrified realization that he was not the biggest predator in the room. He sank back into his chair. Dana adjusted her glasses. She looked like she was presiding over a board meeting, not a crime scene. Regarding your concern about the recording, Mr. Price, Dana said, her tone professional and dry. The recording was made on the premises of the Hart residence. True, however, The recording device used the baby monitor was broadcasting over an unsecured frequency to the laundry room, where Ms. Rivera was residing as a guest. Furthermore, the recording you just heard from this room, that was authorized by Mr. Mercer, who is a party to the conversation. Legally, you have no leg to stand on. She opened a folder on the table. She pulled out 3 sheets of paper, stamped with the seal of the state court. But that is a debate for your defense attorney, Dana continued. Right now, we have a more pressing matter. At 8 o'clock this morning, the Honorable Judge Pendergast signed an emergency ex parte temporary restraining order. She slid the papers across the glass table. They spun smoothly and stopped in front of Logan. This order freezes all assets related to the Harbor Light Foundation, Dana said. It also freezes the personal accounts of Vivian Hart and Logan Price. Pending an investigation into financial fraud and elder abuse, the banks were notified at 8:15. The freeze went into effect 12 minutes ago. Freezes, Vivian whispered. The word seemed to choke her. What do you mean? Freezes? It means your cards will not work, I said. It means your transfers will bounce. It means you cannot move a cent. Brianna let out a gasp. She grabbed her phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. Her thumbs flew across the glass. She was opening her banking app. We watched her face. It went from confusion to panic in real time. It says account restricted, Brianna stammered, looking up at her mother with wide, terrified eyes. Mom, why does my account say contact bank? I have my lease payment due on Tuesday. I have the car note. That is a mistake, Vivian said, her voice rising in pitch. It is a mistake, Logan. Fix it. Call them. Logan did not move. He was staring at the court order, reading the text with the grim focus of a man watching his life implode. It is not a mistake, Viv, Logan said hoarsely. It is a federal injunction. They locked us out. They locked us out of everything. Harold cleared his throat. The sound drew everyone's attention back to the head of the table. He was sitting perfectly still, his hands clasped over the gold fountain pen. I built this family, Harold said softly, and I built the Harbor Light Foundation. I foolishly believed that the two could support each other. I believed that if I gave you enough, you would eventually want to give something back. He shook his head slowly. I was wrong. And when a structural engineer realizes a foundation is rotten, he does not paint over it. He reinforces it, or he digs it out. He looked at Vivian. The bylaws of the Harbor Light Foundation contain a succession clause, Harold explained. It states that if the primary trustee, that is me, is incapacitated, or if there is credible evidence of an attempt to usurp the trust through malfeasance, the board of directors has the power to trigger an immediate transfer of authority. The board, Vivian spat. You are the board. It is just you and those 2 old lawyers. Actually, the board met this morning at 9:30, Harold said. Via secure video conference. They reviewed the evidence Ms. Rivera and Ms. Rivers provided. They reviewed the forged signature. They reviewed the audio tapes. He paused. They voted unanimously to trigger the clause. As of 10 o'clock this morning, I am no longer the sole decision-maker for the foundation. The authority has been transferred to a successor trustee. Who? Logan demanded. Who did you give it to, the state? Some bank? Harold smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man playing chess who sees mate in 3 moves. That information is sealed, Harold said. For now. He let the silence hang there. He let them wonder. He let them look at Dana. He let them look at the agents. He let them look at me. I saw the realization dawning in Vivian's eyes. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in her life. She saw the girl who chopped her onions. She saw the girl who slept in her laundry room. And now, she saw the girl sitting at the right hand of the man who controlled $85 million. The horror on her face was absolute. It was worse than the fear of poverty. It was the fear of subordination. You didn't, Vivian whispered. You wouldn't give it to her. She is a child. She is a nobody. Harold did not confirm or deny it. He simply turned to Agent Miller. I believe these people are trespassing in my suite, Harold said. Agent Miller stepped forward. Mr. Price? Mrs. Hart? Miss Hart, the agent said. We have a conference room set up on the third floor. We need to ask you some questions regarding the document titled Power of Attorney and the attempted wire transfer on Wednesday. You are not under arrest at this moment, but you are being detained for questioning. Please come with us. I am not going anywhere with you, Vivian snapped, trying to muster her old arrogance. I am calling my lawyer. You can call your lawyer from the conference room, Agent Miller said, but I suggest you use the landline. Your cell service provider is usually tied to your credit card autopay, and given the asset freeze, that might be cutting off shortly. It was a petty detail, but it broke her. Vivian slumped, the fight drained out of her body, leaving her looking old and small in her expensive suit. Logan stood up. He walked toward the door without looking at anyone. He looked like a man marching to the gallows. Brianna followed him, clutching her broken phone to her chest, tears streaming down her face, ruining her spray tan. Vivian was the last to rise. She looked at Harold one last time. I am your daughter, she said. Her voice was hollow. I know, Harold said. That is the only reason you are walking out of here without handcuffs. She turned and walked out. The agents followed them. The heavy oak door clicked shut. The silence that returned to the penthouse was different now. It was clean. It was the silence of a storm that had passed. Harold let out a long, shuddering breath. He slumped slightly in his chair, the regal posture fading. Suddenly, he looked 84 years old again. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. I got up and walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? I asked. He patted my hand. His skin was cool and dry like paper. I am tired, Nora, he admitted. It is exhausting work. Disappointed people you love. Dana was packing up her laptop. She closed the lid with a snap. You did good. Harold, she said. The freeze is solid. They are scared. They are going to turn on each other in that conference room within the hour. Logan will blame Graham. Vivian will blame Logan. We are not done, Harold said. He straightened up, forcing the strength back into his spine. This was just the warning shot. They still think this is a civil dispute. They still think they can lawyer their way out of it. He looked at me. Tomorrow is Monday, he said. Monday, I repeated. 9 o'clock, Ridgeview Notary. They will go, Harold said. Desperate people always double down. They will think that if they can just get the paper signed, if they can just prove I authorized it, they can override the freeze. They will try to legitimize the forgery. And we will be there, I said. We will be there, Harold agreed. It is time for the final act. We are going to let them play the scene out. We are going to let them stand in front of an officer of the court and lie. He stood up, leaning heavily on the table for a moment before finding his balance. Go get some sleep. Project manager, Harold said, a faint twinkle returning to his eye. Tomorrow, we go to work and wear a suit. You are not the help anymore. I looked out the window at the city. The sun was high now, burning off the morning mist. The world looked different from up here. It looked like a grid. It looked like a plan. And for the first time, I held the pen. Monday morning at Ridgeview Notary Services smelled of burnt coffee and copier toner. We arrived at 8:30, 30 minutes ahead of the schedule Graham Doyle had set. It was not just Harold, Dana, and me. We brought an entourage that transformed the drab, beige conference room into a miniature courtroom. 2 agents from the Economic Crimes Division, Miller and Ruiz, were dressed in plain gray suits, posing as legal assistants. A court stenographer sat in the corner, her machine ready to capture every syllable. And then there was Mr. Lake, the notary. Dana had spent 10 minutes alone with him before we sat down. She showed him the analysis of the digital signature and the court order freezing the assets. When Mr. Lake came out of his office, he looked pale and sweaty, the look of a man who realized he was about to be an accessory to a felony. He agreed to our terms immediately. The signing would be recorded, witnessed, and conducted exactly by the book. At 9 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Vivian walked in first, wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi. Brianna was behind her, looking exhausted and devoid of her usual sparkle. Logan marched in with a forced confidence, carrying a thick leather portfolio. Graham Doyle brought up the rear, checking his watch, looking like a man who had a tea time at 11. They stopped dead when they saw us. Harold was sitting at the head of the long laminate table. He was not the confused old man they expected to bully into submission. He was sitting upright, his hands folded on the table, flanked by Dana Rivers and the two assistants. "What is this?" Graham asked, his smooth voice faltering for a fraction of a second. This was supposed to be a private signing, just family and counsel. "It is a signing," Dana said pleasantly, gesturing to the empty chairs on the opposite side of the table. "We are just ensuring that all procedural benchmarks are met. Given the size of the estate transfer, we thought it prudent to have a record." "That is unnecessary," Graham said, trying to regain control. "This is a simple family power of attorney. We do not need a stenographer." "We insist," Harold said. His voice was low, gravelly, and left no room for argument. "Sit down, Graham." Graham hesitated, looking at Logan. Logan gave a nervous nod. They sat. The air in the room was so tense it felt like it could snap. "Mr. Lake cleared his throat. He sounded like he was choking on glass. "We are here today," Mr. Lake said, reading from a script Dana had likely provided, "to execute a durable power of attorney and a transfer of trust assets regarding Mr. Harold Mercer. The documents grant full financial and medical control to Mrs. Vivian Hart." He looked at Graham. "Do you have the documents?" Graham slid a thick stack of papers across the table. "Everything is in order. We just need the signature." Mr. Lake picked up the document. He turned to the signature page. He was about to point to the line for Harold to sign when Dana raised her hand. "Objection," Dana said calmly. "We dispute the capacity of the grantor and the authenticity of the previous authorizations used to initiate this draft." "Capacity," Graham scoffed. "Harold is right here. Ask him your questions. He is fine." "We will get to Harold," Dana said. "First, we need to address the digital footprint. I would like to introduce our independent expert, Mr. Malik Stone." The door to the side office opened, and Malik walked in. He was wearing a hoodie under a blazer, looking every bit the tech wizard. He plugged his laptop into the large monitor on the wall. "Who is this?" Logan demanded. "This is a circus. This is the man who analyzed the electronic signature you sent to Sovereign Trust on Wednesday," I said. Malik hit a key. The screen lit up. On the left side were a dozen examples of Harold's signature from his driver's license, his passport, and old tax returns. They were fluid, with slight variations in pressure and angle, the natural inconsistencies of a human hand. "These are the control samples," Malik said. "Note the stroke variance. Now, look at the right side." A massive, blown-up image of the signature from the transfer request appeared. It was jagged, pixelated, and perfectly uniform in color. "This is a vector trace," Malik explained. "It is a digital collage. The pressure mapping is 0. A human did not write this. A computer drew it." Graham started to sweat. I could see the damp patches forming on his shirt collar. "That is ridiculous," Graham stammered. "Mr. Mercer has a tremor. He uses a stylus sometimes. Electronic signatures often look different due to screen sensitivity. It is a normal variation for a man of his age." "A tremor," Harold repeated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his fountain pen. He pulled a blank sheet of paper from the legal pad in front of him. "Mr. Lake," Harold said. "Watch closely." Harold put the pen to the paper. In one smooth, fluid motion, he signed his name, Harold J. Mercer. He underlined it with a sharp, decisive stroke. There was no shake, no hesitation. It was the signature of a man who had signed billion-dollar contracts. Malik scanned the fresh signature instantly with a handheld wand, and it popped up on the screen next to the fake one. The fresh signature matched the old controls perfectly. It looked nothing like the forgery. That looks pretty steady to me. Graham, Harold said. It seems my tremor has miraculously cured itself. Graham was pale now. He looked at Logan, desperate for backup. Look, maybe there was a glitch in the bank's software. It does not matter. He is here now. He can sign the new papers physically. That validates the intent. Intent? Dana asked. Let us talk about intent. She nodded to Agent Miller. The agent pressed play on a small recorder sitting in the center of the table. The voice of Vivian Hart filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. Just want to control the fund so no one else can touch it. Then Logan's voice, arrogant and booming. When the fund money moves to Seabright, it is ours. It is not for those poor kids anymore. And finally, Graham's voice. My consulting fee for this structure is $60,000. We frame it as a tax restructuring. The recording stopped. The silence in the room was absolute. Vivian was staring at the table, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Brianna had her head in her hands. Logan stood up so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. He pointed a shaking finger at Graham. He told me it was legal, Logan shouted, his voice cracking. He told me it was a standard tax optimization strategy. He said the digital signature was just a placeholder. I didn't know it was fraud. He is the financial advisor. I just listened to him. You lying coward, Graham hissed. You told me Harold was a vegetable. You told me he wouldn't know the difference. Gentlemen, Mr. Lake said, his voice trembling. He pushed the papers back across the table. I cannot notarize these documents. I am flagging this transaction as fraudulent in my logbook, and I am required by law to report this attempt to the National Notary Association. Agent Miller and Agent Ruiz stood up. They were no longer assistants. They were law enforcement. Graham Doyle and Logan Price, Agent Miller said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted embezzlement of charitable assets. No, Vivian wailed. No, please, Logan. I watched as they cuffed Logan. The arrogance was gone. He looked like a deflated balloon. Graham was silent, his eyes dead, already calculating his plea deal. Agent Ruiz turned to Vivian and Brianna. Miss Hart, you are not under arrest at this moment, but you are named subjects in this investigation. You are to surrender your passports immediately. Do not leave the city. As the agents began to lead the men out of the room, Vivian threw herself toward Harold. She grabbed the lapel of his suit. Daddy, stop them, she begged. Please, it is Logan. It is Graham. I didn't know. I just wanted to protect the family. Do not do this to us. Think of the twins. Harold looked down at her. His face was sad, but it was not soft. I am thinking of the twins, Harold said. That is why I am doing this. I cannot let them be raised by people who think theft is a financial strategy. But we are family, Vivian sobbed. You chose to lock my granddaughter in a laundry room, Harold said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the room. You chose to look at me and see a dollar sign. You made your choices. Vivian, I am simply choosing to take responsibility for the people you wanted to crush. He gently removed her hand from his coat. Goodbye, Vivian. She collapsed into a chair, weeping, as the agents led the others out. The door closed, leaving only the sound of her sobs and the hum of the stenographer's machine. Dana reached into her briefcase. She pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. She placed it in front of Harold. The resolution from the board, Dana said. Ready for your signature. Harold picked up his pen. He signed the bottom of the document. Then, he slid the folder across the table to me. Project manager, he said. It is your turn. I looked at the document. Resolution to appoint successor trustee. Effective immediately. New trustee Nora Rivera. My hand shook slightly as I picked up the pen. It was heavy. It felt warm from his grip. I looked at Harold. He nodded. I signed my name. Nora Rivera. It was done. The power had shifted. The Harbor Light Foundation, and the $85 million it controlled, was now under my protection. Harold reached into his pocket again. He pulled out a black plastic card. It was the key card to the Crown View penthouse. He slid it across the table until it rested next to my hand. "The Thanksgiving table does not belong in the basement anymore, Nora," he said. "From now on, the table is wherever you choose to set it, and the guests are whoever you choose to invite." We walked out of the Ridgeview building into the bright, cold sunlight. The air smelled of exhaust and winter, but to me, it smelled like possibility. We stopped on the corner. Across the street, there was a used bookstore. In the window, I could see the stack of discounted textbooks. I looked at them. Yesterday, I was willing to sell my future for a sandwich. Today, I could buy the building. "So," Harold said, leaning on his cane, "what is the first order of business?" "Trusty Rivera." I looked at the bookstore, then at the skyline of the city I had studied for so years. "Scholarships," I said, "and housing. We are going to build a dorm for students who are at risk of homelessness. We are going to make sure no one has to sell their books to eat, and we are going to start with the students at my university." Harold smiled. "Project manager does not destroy," he quoted. "They build," I finished. I looked directly into the invisible lens of the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the first time. If you have ever been treated like the help in your own family, if you have ever been locked in the basement metaphorically or literally, remember this: you can climb to the 48th floor. You just need evidence, self-respect, and the right allies. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on the ending. Don't forget to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story of justice served.